My name is Father Robert Bruciani, speaking from the Priory of the Most Holy Trinity in Palayamkottai, Tamil Nadu, South India. Now, Tamil Nadu is at the bottom on the east side of India. It has a population of 60 million souls. The society established itself in India 25 years ago, this year actually, and from our priory we service a network of 7 Mass centres. 7 Mass centres plus now an orphanage chapel, so that's 8 chapels altogether. 3 priests live at the priory, and we also run a school, and we are associated very closely with an orphanage, the orphanage of the Society of Servi Domini, which is part of the apostolate of the Consoling Sisters of the Sacred Heart in Italy. The priory was established 25 years ago in India, originally at Tuticorin, then it later moved to Palayamkottai. Until 2006, the apostolate in South India comprised merely a network of Mass centres, and the priests spent long hours travelling over long weekends, saying Mass, hearing confessions, and giving catechism teaching at these Mass centres. But after a number of years, I think it must be admitted that the progress was not as great as one would have hoped. The number of congregation was not expanding in many of the chapels, and the number of vocations being produced was not as high as we would have hoped. That all changed in the year 2006. In 2006, the society took under its wing a young lady who had set up her own orphanage 10 years ago now in Andhra Pradesh. And this young lady, by the mysterious workings of Providence, discovered the society and made known her desire to pursue a religious vocation. Now, this left her in a bit of a quandary. She had this wonderful work of charity, the orphanage, that she was running almost single-handedly, and she feared that she would have to give everything up if she was to pursue God's will, as she saw it. That of His will was that she pursue a religious vocation. Father Couture, the district superior at the time, sent her on a tour of the traditional convents around Europe, and she visited the Consoling Sisters of the Sacred Heart in Vigna, just north of Rome in Italy, and they agreed to take on her orphanage if she pursued a vocation in their community, in their religious community. And she persevered in this vocation, and she was professed, and the Consoling Sisters took under their wing the work of the orphanage. Now, there was a problem, because this orphanage was based in Andhra Pradesh, which is about 1,000 kilometers north of Palayamkottai, and so it would have been impossible for the society to provide the daily Mass that sister would have desired and certainly needs as a religious. And she bravely took the decision to remove the entire orphanage down to Palayamkottai, near us, to be near us, so to receive Mass every day and the sacraments. And in doing so, she brought to the mission 30 souls, orphan souls, and gave to us a critical Mass that enabled us to open a school. Now, being able to open a school opens up a completely new dimension to the apostolate, because it enables us to teach Catholic doctrine profoundly. Instead of half an hour after Mass on a Sunday, we can give the children as many as 4-5 hours of catechism or a religious doctrine every week. Now, of course, the religious training we give to the children is not confined just to the catechism classes, to the religious knowledge classes at school. Every facet of their lives may be imbued with a Catholic ethos. They may live an entirely Catholic culture. And it is my feeling, and certainly the feeling of many educators in the church and throughout church history, that the running of schools is a condition sine qua non, which means a condition without which we cannot succeed in educating Catholic children. We have to educate them in Catholic schools. There are rare exceptions where very pious families can educate their children to an extent where their children's faith is not threatened if they go to the local state schools, or if they go to local secular schools, or even modern Catholic schools. But for the most part, a child does need an education in a traditional Catholic school if they are to weather the storm that will face them when they leave school and leave the home. So, the arrival of the orphanage in Palikantai gave us a critical mass to establish a school. And so now we have an apostolate, which is a very exciting and solidly founded apostolate, and rapidly expanding too. At present we have our priory, and at the priory we have 27 boys who are living at the priory. We're currently building a building to accommodate them, because they're all squeezed in into an old prefabricated building at the moment. And so soon we'll be able to accommodate or welcome up to 48 boys once all of the building is completed. Now, and at the orphanage, which is 6 kilometers away, they have purchased 5 acres of land, and they're purchasing little parcels of land next to it, bit by bit. They've built a large building which eventually we hope will be only the convent, which could house up to 16 sisters, and the foundations are being dug for the orphanage proper, which will be big enough to accommodate up to 100 orphans and elderly ladies, all on the same site. And then finally the great pinnacle of their dreams is the building of a magnificent church. The school is currently based on this property here, which is a rented property. It seems prudent at the moment to rent the property until we can be properly founded and have the proper authorizations, and then we can guarantee the long-term future of the school with the arrival of hopefully more helpers, more helpers in the harvest. But we have providentially been able to purchase 3 acres of land almost next to the orphanage. So in the future we hope to have a boys' school in this new land next to the orphanage. And so in the future we hope to have a senior boys' school in this new land that we've purchased next to the orphanage. On the orphanage itself, after building the convent, after building the main orphanage, maybe after building the church, they hope to build a girls' school, and maybe even the primary school, because it would be ideal if the sisters looked after the primary school as well as the senior girls. And that would put in place all of the building blocks necessary to have a complete traditional ecosystem or community. After that, at the priory, we hope to establish a business which will employ orphans, both orphan girls, and maybe their workshops will be at the girls' orphanage, and orphan boys, so that we will have in place all of the building blocks necessary to establish a complete traditional ecosystem. Now, we have to understand that this, in our modern age, is a pressing need, because the outside world is increasingly hostile to Catholic culture, a Catholic lifestyle. Now, up until recently, most traditional Catholics have been content to learn their faith, practice it in the home, and hope that their faith is strong enough to enable them to live in the world and operate as ordinary members of society, going about all of their jobs, having their friends, having all of their pastimes, activities, living in the world as a traditional Catholic. Now, I have to say, this is becoming increasingly difficult. We have to admit, without facing the danger of retreating into ourselves, becoming like Hamish or communities or obscure religious sects. I think we have to admit that the external world is so evil, and the influence it can have upon our own lives, let alone the lives of our friends, our children, our family, is so strong that we have to more and more develop our own world, which is a traditional Catholic world. And so, for example, in our modern world, the existence of the culture of political correctness is an insidious threat against not only a Catholic sense, but just common sense too. We have to be prepared to retreat into or establish our own communities where we can live in sanity, we can live in a sane lifestyle. And so here in South India, we feel that we have put in place, or we are in the process of putting in place, all of the building blocks necessary for a completely traditional community. And I believe that this is necessary to the future of this mission, and it is the most efficient vehicle that will take souls to heaven, because ultimately that is what we're here for.
First, I would like to thank God and thank all the benefactors, because of whom we have the beautiful house we have now. And at present we are continuing the construction, so we are constructing for the orphans and the old people. And maybe it will be ready, God willing, in next year, in 1 year. This orphanage was started in 2000 October. It started in 2000 October. At the time I was in United States. I was working there, and then when I felt inspired, I felt called by God to do something for God. So in 96, 97, I came back to India as a volunteer for 1 year. And during that time I worked with orphans in a village. So I saw the need for the orphanage and also for the old people. Afterwards, again, I went back to America, worked for 2 years. So the whole time I was praying, asking God to give me a sign, to show me the direction. Finally, in 2000, so I came back to India, and my parents were very helpful to me. So we found a house a building which belongs to the diocese in Kadapa, which is in Andhra Pradesh. So it's north of Palayamkotte. It's around 20 hours from here by train. So we took a building, rented a building, and then we started it. In the beginning, when we had nobody, slowly people started to come, and then children started to come. So by the end of 1 year, we were taking care of around 30 people. Slowly started to grow. And then afterwards, in 2004, I came in contact with Father Couture. Means that before that, I did not know anything about tradition also. Slowly, I came to know about tradition. And then in 2006, we made the decision to come here to Palayamkotte, because we can get Mass here every day.
Some people say that being on mission in India is something very difficult. Oh, you must really suffer. You must be a holy soul. Well, I think God put me here to actually try and make me a little holy. But the difficulties that people face here are nothing like what one would imagine. People imagine the great heat, the mosquitoes, the diseases, the difficulty with the food, and all sorts of other difficulties. But I have to say, the greatest challenges are not these at all. They might make life a little more difficult to live than back home, but these difficulties can be easily dealt with. The most difficult thing is actually the chaos that comes with having no sense of the common good. Now, this unfortunately is a result of the Hindu religion, which has been Indian culture. Has been Indian culture. It's not in Indian culture. It is Indian culture for the last 3,000 years. And then so we see the evidence of this not only in civic life, the cleanliness of the streets, the neglect of the poor, the neglect of the suffering, this horrible caste system that exists where charity does not exist. These things are the difficult things of India. And also the political system that has been born out of this system where the common good is not understood. Politics in India is a case of every man for himself. A man has no political creed. Politics is merely a vehicle of self-interest. Now, these are the difficult things in our apostolate, but they, I have to say, are outweighed in great measure by the beauty, the innocence of the faithful, particularly the children. One thing about India is that there are many aspects of the natural law which have been preserved in India that the West, since its rejection of Catholicism, since the Protestant Reformation, they've ignored or deformed. The natural law in relation to, for example, strength of the family, respect for authority within the family. The natural law in relation to, well, one of the most striking things is dress. People are dressed modestly. For example, if you go up to Bombay and you're on one of their trains, really crammed in, you will notice how well the men are dressed. Now, you'll only see, as a man, you'll only see men in your carriage because the women travel separately, because it is not considered right that a woman be compressed into the same carriage as a man. There is a respect for femininity. This respect for femininity is reflected very much in the respect shown by men towards women, the separation of women and men, to give women their freedom, to allow them to be unmolested. This respect for femininity shows particularly also in standards of dress. Women's dress is extremely elegant and very feminine, and all the women in the West, they would do well to come here and try and imitate some of the Indian young ladies. So these are the consolations that are apparent, and for me the greatest consolation is, of course, the innocence of the children. Maybe not these children here, but in general, the innocence of the children. They play as children should play. They get into trouble in a charming way. Their mischief they cause is a charming mischief. It is so little malice involved. It is more the overflowing of juvenile happiness. And And I consider myself particularly privileged to be a father of orphans and also the boarders at the Priory. We currently have 27 boys at the Priory, and also I suppose the priests are father figures for the girls at the orphanage too, and it is a great delight to have to teach and to have to console and to have to inspire and sanctify these children. And so for any difficulty of the apostolate here, it is more than paid for by the wonderful consolation of the children we have. And I really wish some of you benefactors or watchers of the video may come to India to see for yourselves and maybe take home the example of the children that we have here, to give you an idea of the sort of things you should perhaps educate your children or try to cultivate within your children too.